Hi, I'm Ozzie Ostwalt. This week on Religion and Life, we're going to look for Jesus in jail. Luke Edwards of the King Street Church in Boone and community leader Daniel Cook are here to talk about ways religion reaches into our communities in unexpected places, like saloons, the street, and even prisons. Welcome to the show, both of you. Thank you for being here. All right, so I want to start with this T-shirt, Luke and Daniel. Really eye-catching T-shirt here depicting, my guess is Jesus, right? Being booked. It's a mug shot. He has on prison fatigues, and he's holding a placard that says Hebrews 13:3. So could you tell me about this T-shirt? What's this all about?
Yeah, so the T-shirt is a part of our incarceration month that King Street Church has been hosting. It was it was a month-long event, series of events that highlighted issues of incarcerations in the United States. And so the shirt was part of that month, and it was a fundraiser that we've been doing to provide funding for inmates that are getting out of prison and jail and helping them kind of get readjusted back to life. So the proceeds from that shirt are going to the hospitality house who will help folks when they're getting out pay rent.
So you can buy these shirts. Where can I find one?
There's still some for sale left at Anna Bananas.
Okay.
So you can get them there. They're $15, and the proceeds all go to that.
Okay. So this is actually a church initiative here. That your incarceration month. This is something that you all are locally sponsoring, raising money to help with the issue of helping prisoners when they're released from prison. Is all right. How did you come up with the idea of an incarceration month?
So King Street Church started going into the county jail, Watauga County Jail, a year ago, and in the jail we've been doing a King Street Church group, so forming a little Christian community in the pods there. And Daniel and I started talking about different issues and wanting to do some kind of event, and we just kept coming up with good ideas, and so we figured we'd better do a whole month for it.
Okay. So Daniel, I think you've been sort of the driving force behind this initiative. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got the idea and what you hope to accomplish?
Well, it started probably back in 2008, 2009 during economic recession. I owned my own business. I made some poor financial decisions during that time period, and that resulted basically in a 10-month prison sentence for me. Mm-hmm. So I was able to witness and experience these things firsthand, and see also, my peers go through the same thing, and it became something that was very important to me. It was also something that there was not a lot of awareness about. You see TV programs like Lock Up and things like that, that really, I feel like, portrays life behind bars in a very different way than it actually is.
Right.
I did want to raise awareness for a lot of the issues in there, and I also wanted to do something to help, because in the United States, about 70% of people that are incarcerated return within 3 years. It's a very high number. Something has to be done.
Right.
A lot of times, people return because they don't have support. They don't have anywhere to turn. They can't find a job because of the record. They don't have anywhere to sleep. They don't have anywhere to stay. They don't have the things they need to have a normal functioning life. So they go right back to whatever it was that got them in there in the first place. It's like a comfort zone for them, and I just wanted to change things.
So when you're talking about the issues then within the prison walls, and you're really talking about these issues that you just mentioned, recidivism and the challenges that incarcerated individuals face, not only in prison, but I guess something we often forget about is after release. So is this the place where you're going to focus your efforts on incarcerated individuals upon their release? Is that kind of where you're headed with the issues that you're trying to address with this initiative?
Well, there's a very big us and them mentality with most people. As I mentioned before, the mainstream media really paints incarcerated individuals in a different light, as if they were somehow different from you and I.
Right.
I learned very quickly, because of the mainstream media, I was initially very scared to even enter the jail. But very quickly I found out that everyone there was just like me. I mean, it wasn't an us and them. Mm-hmm. These are normal people that made mistakes, yes, but they're normal people, and it's not what society thinks it is.
Right. So there's one element then of what King Street Church is doing here, and that is attacking these issues, addressing these issues that I'm thinking, and maybe you could comment on this, Luke, have been largely ignored by the traditional church. Am I correct in that assumption? I mean, is there very little outreach to the prisons through any type of prison ministry or focus on issues from traditional churches, or am I wrong about that?
One of our speakers for the month was Jonathan Wilson-Hartgrove, who does a lot of work in prison ministry and in new monasticism and all kinds of stuff, speaks all the time. And he said, I think this is the first incarceration month I've ever heard of at a church. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a largely ignored issue. It's one where people tend to look the other way. I think incarceration affects probably almost every church, either through members or family members of church folks. But I think it is something that we don't talk about. Or if we do, there's a lot of folks that kind of have the mentality, well, they deserve what they're getting, and out of sight, out of mind. The issues that are happening in the prison, it wouldn't matter if they didn't commit a crime, so why should we care?
Right.
I think that attitude is pretty prevalent.
Well, I know I actually heard Daniel speak in our church a while back, and I got to thinking, and I'm trying to remember a time in a lifetime of church attendance when I'd actually heard those issues raised in a church setting. So I think it is something that's largely ignored. But we were talking earlier, there's actually some biblical mandate that I guess would suggest that the church should be involved in prison ministries or prison outreach. Is that correct?
Yeah. Matthew 25, it says, when you visited me when I was in prison, as Jesus says, and they said, when were you in prison? He says, whenever you do something for the least of these, you've done it unto me. And so we believe that when we go and visit those that are in prison, when we advocate for them, that we're advocating for Jesus himself. So, and in Scripture, I think there's plenty of examples of prison and jail in Scripture. Paul ended up in jail a lot.
Sure, absolutely.
Old Testament and their stuff.
So now, in addition to raising awareness to some of these very important issues, I think you're both actively involved in what I would call prison ministry, and that is going into either the jail in your case or into the prison and being involved in worship services or pastoral types of activities. Could you tell me a little bit about that? What does religion inside a jail or a religion inside a prison look like? Is it different from outside? What are the challenges that you face and so forth?
Yeah, so I could start with talking about jail, and then Daniel could talk about prison.
Okay, that'd be great.
So in jail, so the difference between jail and prison: jail is where you go when you've been arrested, you can't afford to bond out, and you're waiting for your court date and your sentence or release. So jail's kind of a temporary place. So almost every county in the state would have a jail, and that would be where folks are going until they're waiting for their court date to go through. And so in the jail, it's up to the person that runs that jail as to what kind of religious activities they'll allow there. Jails have less funding and less programming than a prison would, and so that's going to play out in religion also. So
there probably wouldn't be a jail chaplain. Is that what you're suggesting?
So our it's up to whoever's running that jail. So our jail here in Watauga County does have a volunteer chaplain, Chris Fowler, and he does a great job, and he's does other work also, and it's I think a volunteer position. So he goes in weekly and brings in various local pastors with him. There's a few different Bible studies and groups that go in. that I'm aware of. Some of them are kind of speaker oriented. Some of them are Bible studies, interactive.
Is there a typical length of time someone would expect to stay in jail before beginning, does that vary?
It varies really greatly. So we've been going in for a year, and so some of the people have been in the whole time we've been there. So people can be in there for a night, or they can be in there for 2 years. The court process is a lot slower than any of us would imagine.
I would imagine that an individual in that situation would be experiencing emotional turmoil as well. Do you find yourself playing the role of pastor in that sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so an interesting article came out in NPR about the suicide rates in jails are like triple of what they are on the outside, and I think double of what they are in prison, because folks are encountering that first feeling of imprisonment, and it's a really sobering experience and a really emotionally difficult experience to be going from living on the outside and being able to choose what you do to being in prison and not being able to choose what you can do anymore. Sure. So some of our guys have been in prison before. A lot of them have, and they kind of know the drill, and they look fairly comfortable. But then we'll encounter folks that are there for the first time, and you can see the fear in their eyes.
Sure.
It's a really difficult situation. So.
Well, Daniel, what about the difference in prison, for example? What does religion look like in prison? What role does it play? Is it different from situation's different? So people who find themselves in prison know they're going to be there for a specific amount of time. But how does religion function within the walls of a prison?
Well, a lot of times it's a good way. If the yard, per se, the public area for the inmates to utilize in prison is closed because it's dark outside or whatever prison regulations are, a lot of times these religious programs occur after the yard's closed. So it gets people the chance to get out of the dorms or the cells, whatever living conditions they have, and still go have community with other people. As far as the different religions goes, being here in the Bible Belt within North Carolina, it's predominantly Christian. Right. There are some small Muslim groups, and towards the coast there are a larger number of Native American groups that still worship in traditional Native American ways. But it does give people a chance to I guess, get out of their normal routine. Because things do become very monotonous. Right. But it can also be very frustrating as well sometimes, just because the messages you are hearing isn't always exactly what you want to hear or what you need to hear, because what you're hearing is in a large part controlled by the prison facility.
So when a minister or a religious leader of another faith comes in to lead these worship services or devotionals, they have to clear the message by the staff at the prison. Is that what I'm hearing you say? That they what's the fear there, that there's going to be a subversive type message that slips through, or? Well,
for me personally, with the location, a lot of conservative values were brought forward that I didn't necessarily agree with, which was a bit off-putting to me because it wasn't working for me. It wasn't working for a lot of people because I'd like to go back to the us and them mentality for just a moment. Right. To be effective in a prison ministry, you need to, I guess, walk with the inmates there, and not point out the differences, between being incarcerated and being free. There's some real emotional issues that inmates face on a daily basis, and walking with someone is a lot better than
Well, when you have an outside person coming in,
Right.
I would think, I mean, this is part of life that most of us have no experience with. So that person is in for a few hours at best a week, a few minutes at best maybe. And I understand what you're saying. They couldn't possibly even begin to understand everything that the incarcerated individuals are feeling or going through. And I would think it would take a very skilled person to be able to be helpful rather than hurtful in a situation like that.
And it's unfortunate, too, that there's pretty stringent requirements, time limits, on someone that was incarcerated coming back into the prison to minister to prisoners, because that is potentially a security threat for the prison, which is understandable. But on the same hand, I don't know if it's also wholly effective.
I see.
People that are incarcerated.
Yeah. Now, we talked a little bit about this earlier. I know the situation here in this part of the country may not, the religious makeup in a prison may not be as diverse as elsewhere, but you had mentioned there'd be small pockets of Muslims, predominantly Christians, some Native Americans. Is that a source of tension? You know, and in the outside world, we often tend to equate religion and violence, or religion and ideological tension. Does that occur inside the prison? Does religion lead to tensions and conflicts, or how do the different groups get along and work together?
It absolutely can lead to tension and conflicts. They're in prison or jail, when people are in that type of situation. You know, a lot of prisons are overcrowded, so a candy bar can be the reason for tension and violence. Something that's more deeper rooted, like religion, people can discriminate against other people, and do, because of their religion. In particular, in my experience, I started going to the Native American prayer circle with a friend of mine because I was invited, and he also realized that I wasn't really connecting with the other religious activities at the facility. Once I started doing that, you know, some of it was lighthearted from my peers. Some of it was pretty serious, like, why, you know, you're not Native American, why are you doing this?
Right.
And even from staff members. I remember I wasn't able to get the permission from the paperwork. Even though I requested it for a week solid, I couldn't get the paperwork to fill out to be able to do it, because I was a white Christian.
Right. And a lot of these obstacles go back to security threats and the necessity to keep a tight lid on things, I guess. But so have you ever witnessed an instance, say, two people of different faiths entering into conflict or any sort of violent action, just specifically because of their faith, arguments over religion or belief systems?
I have not particularly witnessed a situation where violence or something occurred because of it. I have witnessed violence between two different faiths over a different issue, but it definitely came into play after the fact. There was a little bit more tension because one of the gentlemen was Muslim, the other was Christian. After that, within a few people, there were comments floating around as to why and how religion played into it.
But I also hear you saying, too, that religion also provides opportunities for bonding and social activities, so it plays a positive role. It's not just source of tension. Yeah,
absolutely. And you know, I do say, at the particular facility I was at, there wasn't much walking with. There's been a lot of different times where they were walking with you. I mean, you know, Christmas time, we received, I'm not sure if it was one church or a combination of church, we received basically a goodie bag with things that weren't typically on the canteen and not available to us, like a nicer safety razor, pens, paper, candies that we didn't typically get. It was very nice, and it was that was the first time I felt like someone was trying to walk with me, because these things were the things that we needed.
Right.
And we.
Well, now, Luke, in addition to reaching into the walls of the jail or into the prison, we've mentioned already that recidivism is an issue and a problem. So you're actually now exploring ways to kind of expand what you would consider prison ministry to reach out to folks who have been recently released to help intervene so that they don't go back to an incarcerated state. Is that correct? And what are you doing along those lines?
With King Street Church's Incarceration Month, the biggest issue that really kind of, we were expecting, we wanted to raise 3 or 4 issues. So we want to talk about racism in incarceration. We wanted to talk about recidivism. We wanted to talk about solitary confinement, and a few other things. And the issue that really rose above in the month was this issue of recidivism. And what it really came down to was how are we supporting folks when they get out of prison? And so it was something that really came forward as a focus moving forward from Incarceration Month. And it was kind of cool to see how that kind of naturally happened. So King Street Church is a network of small gatherings or small fresh expressions of church that meets around Boone. So we've got 2 groups that meet in bars downtown. We've got a group that meets in a home, some coffee shops, and we just were invited to start something at the Hospitality House, the homeless shelter in town. And since we've been meeting the past 6 or 7 weeks at the Hospitality House, I've seen at least half a dozen of the guys that I met doing the group in the county jail that are living at the Hospitality House and trying to get a fresh start. And Hospitality House is an invaluable resource for them in getting a fresh start. So we've been able to keep walking alongside these men in their release, which has been a real gift and a real awesome thing to see. And it's so beautiful to see these guys on the outside with their nice clothes and freshly shaved and just full of life and full of hope.
So it kind of brings it full circle then.
Yeah.
And King Street Church is kind of aptly named because you're really in the streets, right? I mean, you're in the saloons, you're in the jail, you're in the homeless shelter. So your presence there on King Street really, I think it's a nice name for the ministry.
Yeah.
Right. Where do you see this headed? You know, it's a wonderful thing here. You've got the church ministering in certain ways. You've got this initiative to raise awareness. Where do you think this is headed for you all? And you know, you mentioned that you've never heard of Incarceration Month before. Do you see this expanding beyond Boone?
Yeah. I had an exciting conversation with a criminal justice professor that we had as one of our speakers, and she said that they're looking at maybe doing an event next year with recidivism. So I think the conversation's gotten started in our community through this event. Some connections have been made. We had the chief of police came to one of our events, and people that are passionate about equality for those that are being released and for those that are in prison got to meet each other. And so I think it's going to be not just a month that ends, but something that really begins a small movement in our community. And I think a big way that our community could quickly support those that are incarcerated is to focus on recidivism and how we can be a community that gives people a second chance.
Right.
A community that believes in people when they're released, that doesn't believe that once you commit a crime you're just doomed for the rest of your life, but one that believes in second chances and provides ways for folks to get out of their situations they're in.
Yeah.
And it's hard getting out. You know, some of these guys they're they have to check a box on an application that automatically gets their application thrown in a trash can.
All right.
They don't have any money. They might have debt that they've accrued in jail. They might walk out of prison with $40 in their pocket, and
Wow.
and they're just dropped off on the corner and told good luck. And so
Wow.
I think there's real practical ways in which our community can come together and support folks
Great.
that are getting out.
Well, Daniel, if you could leave us with one thought that you'd like for our viewers to understand about the incarcerated individuals, what would that be?
I think it would be that release is almost harder than incarceration.
Mm-hmm.
People face a very intense amount of emotional turmoil, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression. 3 of my peers are no longer with us because of suicide. All 3 of them committed suicide within a few months of release. You know, even with me, when I had family, friends rallying around me, the anxiety and depression was almost too much to bear. And a lot of times for people being released, that's not something they want to share. It's like, I was in this filthy facility, but now, I'm sleeping in a king-size bed, or even, anything's better than that. Why am I depressed? It's very, very difficult. And I would just like people to understand that these people, they're just like you and I. Mm-hmm. And they need support. And we're doing ourselves, potential victims a disservice by not supporting and not realizing what's going on for people to repeat.
Right. What you all have shared today has certainly been enlightening, and I commend you for your excellent work, and thank you for coming on to share these things with us. Sure. Well, that's Religion and Life for this week. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please contact us at watchapptv.com. Until next time, I'm Ozzie Ostwalt.